Mark Molinax here, and we're at the final formal hike of our 27-month pilgrimage through Tao Te Ching, verse 81 out of 81. It's been a 27-month trek, this podcast. Thank you, and I mean it. Thank you for all your attendance. Thank you, all my readers, whether singly or as families or as communities of faith, for your patience and companionship through these episodes. Thank you for your corrections. Thank you for your many ways that you said this class was helpful. Thank you. Please do not unsubscribe to this Power for the Peaceful feed, though. Bonus episodes will arrive. Updates. For those wanting another class, please subscribe to the Technicolor Dreamcoat of Religion podcast, which you'll find in the show notes, where I'll be teaching my favorite classes in the academic study of religion using curiosity and critical thinking to show how religion works. Maybe a week, less than a month for sure, there will be a class on how religion gets made. If you found this podcast helpful, even in the least, I'd appreciate you giving it a rating on your podcast provider and share this pod with those in your life who might like it. Today's verse is called Your Table is Ready.
When you listen to the ground and you put your roots down, you can hear what she says if you're listening. When you listen to the ground and you put your roots down, you can hear what she says if you're listening. The sweet sound of the river as she moves over the stones. The same song that the blood in your body sings as it weaves around your bones. When you're listening, are you listening?
We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. T.S. Eliot. There is only the great Tao. It is stillness and deepness. It is magic and response. It came to teach and to help the people of the world. It is the highest and the most respected thing. It is eternal and indestructible. It began earlier than heaven and earth without disclosing its beginning. It lasts longer than heaven and earth without revealing its end. Tao can only be reached by the heart. Emperor Kangxi.
I've asked Eli Thompson, a fellow pilgrim seeker and musician, to be the other voice today. I think you'll enjoy his wise, old soul commentary. Now, Eli, you have a few introductory words about yourself?
Sure. So I hail from the Outer Banks of North Carolina. If any of you are familiar, I'm actually a longtime listener of Power for the Peaceful podcast and had no idea that Mark was located here in North Carolina, where I was, until he mentioned Asheville on the podcast. So naturally, I reached out to Mark, and we've conceived of a new friendship and bond that has been um, quickly wonderful. And I'm happy to be a part of this community and a part of the podcast now. So thank you, Mark.
It's my honor. And for you guys out there, I actually asked him because Eli knows a good bit about Tao Te Ching, and I think you'll enjoy his commentary today. So today's class will go something like this. We will treat verse 81 in rather short order. We'll check out what's new, what's notable, and worth exploring and commenting upon. Then Eli and I will participate in a spirited but informal conversation about what we think is special about Tao Te Ching, Taoism, and related teachings. Why does Tao matter? How, as I claim each episode, does Tao still speak today? Eli and I have both brought four themes that we would like to discuss. And since we have not conspired on what we would each bring to the microphone, you may hear some overlap, which is kind of perfect. So, Eli, would you kindly start today's class with your reading of verse 81?
Verse 81. Serving the flow. True words are not beautiful. Beautiful words are not truthful. Listeners do not quarrel. Quarrelers do not listen. The educated may not be wise. The wise may not be educated. Sages do not accumulate, because the more they pour themselves out for others, the richer they become. Just giving, they receive even more. Heaven's Tao flows in abundance, without pinch points. Tao's sages serve Tao's flowing. and do not block it with striving or competition. That's all.
At this point in today's episode, instead of at the very last, as is my custom, I'm also going to read now the kid or family friendly version of verse 81. It's called Giving is Winning. True words are not always fancy. Fancy words are not always true. Good listeners don't argue. Argument makers don't listen. Wise people may not be book smart. Book smart people may not be wise. The wise don't hoard. The more they give, the more they have. Helping others fills them up. Tao flows like a big river, giving to everyone without running dry. The wise help Tao flow by not blocking it with selfishness. And that's it.
So, Eli, do you have any first thoughts about this verse?
Sure, I'd love to. With this being the last verse, so to speak, of the Tao, it feels like it comes full circle from the first verse, if any of you can remember back that far, about words. And that is the conception of the Tao, is that words can only be a guidepost towards truth. True words are not beautiful, and beautiful words are not truthful. And here we are reminded once again of the Tao's paradoxical nature. And Lao Tzu clearly wanted to leave people with this uncertainty, the certainty of uncertainty. And it feels like verse 81 is a real culmination of that. Yeah.
Yeah, when you just spoke, I'm reminded that words are sometimes like signs. They point to something like, the moon, but they're not the moon itself. So if we have a sign towards Mount Mitchell here in Western North Carolina, the sign is not Mount Mitchell at all. So I have one place in this verse to highlight. Near the last of this verse, as I translated it, the text reads, Heaven's Tao flows in abundance without pinch points. Literally, it reads this way in Chinese. Heaven's way is to benefit and do no harm. It could be helpful to see how other translations have rendered this same sentence. One of the first translators of Tao Te Ching into English, James Legge, wrote this, With all the sharpness of the way of heaven, it injures not. Arthur Waley said, The way of heaven is to sharpen without cutting. Then there's J.H. MacDonald's translation. The Tao of heaven nourishes by not forcing. Jia Fu Fang phrased it like this, The Tao of heaven is pointed, but does no harm. So I wanted the class to hear one more time how peaceful, non-harming Tao is. Tao is not just power for the peaceful. Tao is empowerment, embodied in each living cell of life, in each atom. And if we ever understand dark matter or dark energy, I'm sure that Tao is at work in these too. In this verse, Lao Tzu is conscious that he is at the end of this long 5,000 character epic poem. This verse has the feel of a wrapping up. It issues reminders. From verse 1's wild claim that Tao is wild and unclaimable by language, concept, brain, or argument, to this verse 81, which is a praise song to Tao's non-destructive, non-competitive, open-handed generosity of the spirit or process that conceived of and created the entire universe. This is a universe that Tao has made with peace, of peace, for peace, a universe of open-handed generosity. Peace and generosity are our resets. Not just our resets, they're our presets. Our spiritual tuning forks for when we forget Tao's peaceful beat and rhythm of the universe. So it feels right to read verse 37 here. Why 37? If you recall, verses 1 through 37 are concerned chiefly with Tao, but verses 38 forward have a through line of emphasis on Tao's power, or Te. Thus, 37 is a kind of conclusion verse for Tao Te Ching, part 1, and verse 81 is a conclusion to the whole shebang. So, Eli, would you?
Verse 37, natural action. Tao does not use action to accomplish. It is the ground of action itself. Nothing is halfway accomplished. Only after leaders finally accept the principle does the world turn around to its natural state. Of course, old habits of acting busy die hard, but perish they do when exposed to the unnameable and its simplicity. Dedication to this simplicity loosens old habits. Without the turbulence of these old desires, original stillness reigns. Peace just settles in naturally.
I love that naturally thing.
Mm.
I believe Lao Tzu sought in his violent days a workaround to the disputations and egomania of his age. Disputations and egomania continue today. Can I get a witness? I believe that we need Tao Te Ching more than ever. So I ask Eli, as I ask myself, and now I ask you, the class, with what do we feed our being, ourself? Do we feed the self with difficult thoughts in a daily diet of disputes or separation, of conflict and of judging? Or is our diet one of peace, harmony, compassion, and being held with all the universe by Tao's embrace? Lao Tzu was not some hippie sage offering a flavor of the month diet. Oh no, 1,000 times no. By sourcing peace in the natural as nature itself, Lao Tzu makes a strong statement that the universe we experience is our source, and it is ever and always peace. And if our mindsets lean towards Tao Te Ching, we can confidently make our universes, for Tao is our building blocks. Tao Te Ching is Lao Tzu's demonstration that wherever we are in the universe, peace is our source, our destiny, and our only diet and path along the way. Otherwise, chaos and competition. How am I doing, Eli? Thoughts?
You're doing a wonderful job. I believe this interjection of verse 37 is a very important place to make the transition from Tao to the power of the Tao, and perhaps adding some action to the non-action that is
Yeah.
so often talked about when you hear about Taoism. And it can be really hard, again, to put into words
Yeah.
these concepts that are ultimately a felt sense. And Lao Tzu continuously tries to tell us that it is a felt sense inside of our self
Yeah.
that leads to the peace around us.
Yeah.
And as you said, in today's world and in yesterday's world and many of the worlds that have come before us, we often are caught in a diet of chaos and conflict and separation. And the Tao tells us, as it has for thousands of years, that it is never not the way to turn inward.
Yeah.
And be in touch with the peace of self so that you can share it with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Without pinch points.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
When you're listening, are you listening? When you're listening, are you listening?
Tao needs no words. It needs no eloquence, no adornment. Just simple wu-wei acts. Acts in accord with heaven's peace. Acts that grow and expand like seeds. And once sown, the sower detaches in wu-wei fashion, seeking neither reward nor glory. Wu-wei is why Tao Te Ching and Taoism are so countercultural, so revolutionary, and so misfitting. The Taoist just does their open handed duty and then withdraws, hands closed off to reward.
I'm trying to lose myself, shooting for that. I've had enough of myself. Self erasure and blending into the scenery and background. Bruce Springsteen in his 2016 interview with The New Yorker.
An interview I hope you go find and listen to. So long as one understands the ultimate reality of Tao and its potential and power for peace, once upon a time, or now, and in the future, no matter what, then greed, hatred, and delusion will not arise and get a life. These things are just temporary. They don't last. Tao's abundance survives our every thirst for revenge, every craving for power, every scheme of the ego. What does last is Tao's peace, harmony, non-competitiveness, wu-wei. These are already here. And in the mighty words of John Lewis, we just join it. There's a beauty, a treasure in everything. Christians call it the imago Dei, or the image of God. Buddhists call it the Buddha nature. Taoists call it Tao, something that pre-exists us, informs who we are, as inside as it is outside, and that irreducible datum. Time cannot erode, distance cannot weaken, and it is essentially unforgettable. It is now, and it is everywhere, a continuous sacrament, above our heads, under our noses, every minute of our lives, every second the universe has ticked. This is what Lao Tzu wanted to have heard. And he thought that if leaders could just get that, society would work better. Thoughts, Eli?
Yes. What you've just added here speaks so deeply to how I've often felt, especially as I've encountered the Tao in my life. And oftentimes, I'm 31 years old now, so some might say that's long and some may say that's very short. I'm often led to be sort of a compassionate rascal in my relationships. And oftentimes, this conversation around the temporariness of our earthly desires and pursuits, and as the Buddhists might call it, our egoic realm, will always, as you said, fall away.
Yeah.
They cannot sustain. But what can sustain? And that is what we call the Tao, true nature, the truest truth. And sometimes to my younger friends or older friends, that can be unnerving when desires and goals and reality feels so real. And I often try to, again, compassionately to myself and others, assure that what is right and what is true will sustain, and the rest will fall away.
Yeah. I learned this very lesson in Seoul, Korea, where I used to live teaching at a women's university there. And around that university was this unbelievable ice cream place. And I started going there every day. And then it started breaking my budget by doing it every day. So I had to stop. Could I stop voluntarily? And so one day I just went past the ice cream shop, looked into it, but kept on walking. And for about 5 minutes, I was just, oh, that ice cream, gosh, I got to go back there. But minute 6 and forward, nothing. The desire was so temporary. It had no life of its own. And so the next day and the next day, next day, I just practiced that, going past it and learning by experience, by direct experience, how temporary a simple desire can be. To understand Tao is first to confess a radical agnosticism. That is, you don't really know. No ordinary words, no human attributes, no skills, no thinking, no concepts can locate Tao. To know Tao, one almost has to be like a bat and echolocate. Peace is there, though. If we don't locate the rhythm of Tao in our own lives and our own times, Tao will show up, disguised, of course, again and again, until we pay attention and learn yet again that our source and the universe's source are the same. There is no shortcut. Verse 21 concludes like this. How do I know this? Intuition. Tao is always leaving a quiet tracing of its ways. What if we devoted ourselves to educate, inform, and help people understand the world is a living, breathing organism of harmony, rather than some synthetic great machine that could be programmed and calibrated to meet our human desires? It is possible, as verse 25 reminds us, which is my favorite verse. It never fails to give me goosebumps. So, Eli, I'm going to read this. 25, greatness everywhere. Mysterious but complete, pre-existing the universe, arriving soundlessly and formless, alone it endures without change, whole, complete, untiring, and flowing through everything, it may be considered the universe's womb. If forced to name this, I utter the sound Tao, or worse, the way. Reluctantly, I describe it with the word great. It alone functions everywhere, calling all things back to their single source home. There's not much else to say except to name four amazing things: Tao, heaven, earth, and anyone connected with Tao. In these four, the universe demonstrates its greatest traits. And here's the money part for me. If I get weepy, please excuse me. Know your interconnections. Human beings come from earth. Earth's patterns entwine with heaven's. Heaven roots in Tao, and Tao's blueprint is nature itself. Wow. So, homework for the rest of your life. Class, we preach our own funerals all our life long. The virtues that we may put on a CV or resume to impress others are not the same virtues we want to be talked about at our funerals. No one really cares how hard you worked for a living or how much money, power, or status we achieved. Instead, our legacies will be who we loved, who loved us, and what we did to become great peace resources for others. So, the most countercultural thing you can do is every day walk beneath shimmering leaves. Observe a river, however calm or mighty, at work. Speak to spiders as an equal. This is how the world changes. It starts within and begins to affect the without. Inside matches outside, like inner peace matches the universe's peace. Will you be that person? Thoughts on that?
Oh, I just love that so much. The thing that continuously draws me back and back to the Tao is its incessant and soft leaning towards nature. Because when we really sit with ourselves and sit with nature, what can be anything else? And this is peace. Nature is peace. It is the foundation of all things and the home of all things. And gosh, does that give me so much joy and sorrow and all of these things that make us human,
Yeah.
just to observe it daily. And actually, I wrote a song yesterday. If you don't mind me reading just a little small piece of a verse,
Please do. Yes.
Taoism is a really big part of my creative process, in the surrendering to what I don't know. So this verse just kind of came out of the ether, and it goes like this. So I surrender to the sweetness of uncertainty, like the way a garden teaches us to let it be. Does a wave, when it crashes, really disappear, or just melt back into something that was always here?
Oh, wow. Okay. Wasn't ready for that greatness right there. That's beautiful.
I wasn't either when it happened. But my feeling there is again this idea of, can there be anything but nature? And when we slow ourselves down enough and slow our minds down enough to really be present to it, there's a felt sense, and Lao Tzu is trying to, again, through the faultiness of words, show us that this is the truth.
Yeah. What if we adapted the pace of nature? Full stop. Let's take a short break, after which Eli and I will discuss why Tao matters.
When you're listening, when you're listening, are you listening? When you're listening, when you're listening, are you listening?
So, Eli, you and I brought four themes and teachings to bring to our podcast, or this podcast, to its close, or maybe its pause. My list includes: first, non-controlling wu-wei; second, original instructions; third, non-violence; and fourth, emptiness. What did you bring to the table?
Well, Mark, I couldn't help but also bring wu-wei along the way. We'll find out if that's a redundant usage of non-action.
Okay.
Second, I brought along humility. or to be like water. And third, I also brought nonviolence, a very important teaching of this time. And fourth, the idea of knowledge versus wisdom.
Okay. All right. So what we'll do is that I'll go first, and we'll do this first pair, wu-wei from Mark, and then wu-wei from Eli. All right. So, wu-wei from Mark's perspective. A principal exhortation in Taoist literature is to abandon the illusion of ever having control over outcomes. Chapter 7 of the Zhuangzi, the second most important text of Taoism, says, not doing, not being a repository of plans and schemes. Not doing, not being the one in charge of what happens. The way of the sage is much closer to improvisational jazz than to the execution of a predetermined plan. Wu-wei is usually couched as not doing, which is its literal translation. Non-doing is better, but wu-wei is also action. Let's be clear, it's wise action, though. Wise non-action as well. And here's a story from Alan Watts. When a cat falls out of a tree, it lets go of itself. The cat becomes completely relaxed and lands lightly on the ground. But if a cat were about to fall out of a tree and suddenly make up its mind that it did not want to fall, it would become tense and rigid and would become just a bag of broken bones upon landing. In the same way, it is the philosophy of Tao that we are falling off of a tree at every moment of our lives. As a matter of fact, the moment we were born, we were kicked off a precipice and we are falling, and there's nothing that can stop it. So instead of living in a state of chronic tension and clinging to all those sorts of things that are actually falling with us because the whole world is impermanent, be like a cat. What else is wu-wei? Oh, I could go for an hour on this. I'll just say Sabbath practice for you folks who may be Jewish or Christian. Just one day out of 7 doing something else, doing no money-making work, just doing something else. Wu-wei is also early retirement from ego-invested activities or arguments. I practice wu-wei in my marriage all the time. Wu-wei can be shown also by these examples here. First of all, a key in a sticky lock. Forcing the key is often our de facto course of action. However, the key is liable to break off in the lock. Instead, jiggling the key to find that sweet spot is proper wu-wei. Second example, a sailor trying to make forward progress in a strong headwind. Pointing the sailboat directly into the wind would mean going backward, but just turn the rudder at alternating 45-degree angles into the headwind. It's known as tacking, and your progress is assured. Now, number 3, if you're a swimmer at the ocean and you get caught in an ocean riptide, are you in trouble? Well, the way to lose one's life is to struggle against the current. Safety lies in going with the tide's flow until it carries one outside of its power, and then you swim home. Less doing, more cooperating. Finally, a recent novel, Richard Powers' The Overstory, is about the hidden power of trees, and it's framed my understanding of wu-wei like this, quote, the best and easiest way to get a forest to return to any plot of cleared land is to do nothing, nothing at all, and do it for less time than you might think, unquote. So just saying, when I interrupt my life, when I interrupt my unfolding life with my own ideas, my own interventions, it's got to be my way, I threaten life itself. Wu-wei is the vital heart of every process of life itself. So, Eli, what do you think about wu-wei?
So, Mark, I think this is maybe I'm showing my Zen roots here a little bit, but for me, the greatest, as we said, the fingers pointing at the moon or the sign pointing at Mount Mitchell, the greatest pointer to wisdom in my life is my own lived experience. And so, in the way, perhaps this lived experience we are in this room today is that, Mark, you're a writer, and I'm an unwriter. So you came with this wonderfully written and curated example of wu-wei, and I came with an empty mind. And I think that shows wu-wei in action, maybe through through multiple people at once,
Mhm.
in that my non-doing perhaps provides just as much here as your doing. As I said, I'm a young person to a lot of people, and to some an older person. I'm 31, and in my 20s, I spent a lot of my life doing,
Mhm.
and doing from a place of wanting and wanting to achieve. And what was that achieving going to get me? I'm not totally sure.
Yeah.
Um, but in the context of wu-wei, it was not effortless action as it is translated. It was very much effortful action.
Yeah.
And those actions, as Lao Tzu says, cannot sustain and cannot continue on.
Mhm.
And truth will always catch you at the bottom.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's been my lesson into wu-wei, is through my own life of striving and learning the peace of unstriving.
Mhm.
And I think oftentimes in the West, we are led to believe that striving is in fact a virtue.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and and actually many times I've encountered those who are Tao curious, or perhaps have listened to a podcast like this one. They've heard Wu Wei and taken it to mean doing nothing,
Yeah.
truly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to that end, I don't believe that's what Lao Tzu or the Tao means here.
Yeah.
I love the example of Alan Watts and the cat. For me, the metaphor that always comes to mind is that of a river.
Mhm.
Or here in Asheville, we know the power that a river can naturally hold and the serenity that it can hold.
Yeah.
And yet, the river doesn't rush to make any of those things happen. It
Mhm.
just is in its own doing. Um, I have a poem here actually about a river that I wrote a few years ago. And so I'll share it here. And this is, to me, what Wu Wei is. And so life is a river, the eternal taker, the eternal giver, always flowing, never stopping to ask where it's going. We cling and we claw to reach the side, so afraid to just take the ride. Let go, let go, let go of what you wish to know. Turn towards the pain. Let your tears fall like rain. Melt into love and watch it pour down from above. So, yes, life is a river, and how this river will run, and we will float on and on until each become one.
That's really nice. Thank you. My understanding of Wu Wei changed while doing this podcast, and uh, and now I can't think of a better phrase than early retirement, and that is retire from your ego-driven manias, ego-driven last word freakism, whatever it is that you are doing that's really not taking you anywhere. Desires or arguments you want to make, just retire and see what happens. Let's go to my second teaching about what I think Tao is trying to tell us today, and it's called original instructions. Original instructions is a term often used by native peoples for the education on how to live as human beings who exist with and from Earth. I've used the term in this podcast to speak of how Tao is the original instructions for the entire universe. The very universe's processes, being peaceful, have initiated and sustained the universe. All that live or move follow these instructions, or else they are at odds with the very processes that created them and got them here and sustains them. Original instructions teaches me that we're all webbed together, and what happens to the one happens and affects the all. As Herman Melville said, we cannot live only for ourselves. 1,000 fibers connect us with our fellows, and among these fibers, as sympathetic threads, our actions run as causes, and they come back to us as effects. Quite a lesson there. The verse I want to cite here is verse 34, quietly flowing. Great Tao flows in every direction, brooding over and permeating the universe's every particle, all of which depend on Tao. Without noising itself about or making a scene, Tao disappoints not even one particle. Not needing to be in charge, and with no other desire, Tao devotedly nourishes the universe's every speck. Each one has its home in Tao, yet Tao does not boast ownership. Many may regard Tao as insignificant, but it is actually great because it never claims greatness for itself. Some of the original instructions are right here in our bodies, and I point a spotlight on some of these processes. Can we, can you, can I speed up or slow down our growth? Doubt it. Have you ever been in charge of your hormone releases? What if you could beat your own heart? Would that be good news? Or would you die once you forget? Can you control your pupils dilating and contracting? How about your breathing or heart rate? Your digestive processes? I mean, you just eat food and then it comes out the next day, it says is waste. But what happens in the meantime? Did you control any of that? What about your fingernails growing or your hair? Saliva production, your blinking reflex? How does your body know how to heal itself without interference? You know that cut you got last week? Well, you just put a band-aid on it and it's gone now. What happened? It's called original instructions. We are unconsciously competent of so many things. And original instructions are our guidebook, our plan book, the way we actually are to live. All right. Thoughts about what I said, or you want to start your own?
Sure, I'll absolutely reflect off of what you said of and what is said of original instruction, and I'm so grateful for these original instructions because, as you just listed, all of these things we don't have conscious control over, and how wonderful that we don't, because the things that I do have conscious control over, Mark, I am constantly making mistakes through the faultiness of my own mind.
Mhm.
I mean, just this morning, I don't even know where my wallet is actually. So these are things that if they were in charge to the mind, oh, wouldn't it be detrimental?
Yeah.
But this turning back towards the original instructions that, as you mentioned in the beginning, is the basis for so many native cultures that here in the West we have really forgotten and diverted from. And I think we all feel it in our daily lives, whether it is our drive to work or our foray into the grocery stores of our lives, and seeing this separation from what is original
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and how much is to be distilled from letting some of these things go that we take as normal truth. Um, I believe it was said of asked of Gandhi what he thought of Western civilization, and his answer was, "I think it would be a good idea." And so this idea of civilization being our creation is already a diversion from what was true long, long, long ago and what will be true long, long from now, and that
Yeah.
is these original instructions.
Yeah. I mean, why do we have to go out into the forest to get reset
Mm.
or to find our presets? What I mean, we don't go downtown and shop, do we? To do that? That doesn't help.
So with that, I'll jump into since we shared wu-wei, I'll jump into my second um,
Okay.
humble offering here, which is that of humility. And the Tao is just rife with these examples of leaning into the softness of self, the softness of nature, and the strength inherent in that softness, which again in today's world is so often looked down upon or seen as weakness, in fact. And so I go to verse 8, which is just a wonderful verse, and I'll read it here. Be like water. The highest good is like water. Water gives life to the 10,000 things and does not strive. It flows in places men reject, and so is like the Tao. In dwelling, be close to the land. In meditation, go deep into the heart. In dealing with others, be gentle and kind. In speech, be true. In ruling, be just. In daily life, be competent. In action, be aware of the time and the season. No fight, no blame.
Whose was that?
I believe that's Gia Fu Feng
Okay.
and Jane English.
All right. Yeah. Okay. All right.
And what are your thoughts when you hear that verse, Mark?
Oh, gosh. Yeah. I'm thinking about water does these things, whether it's saliva or tears or a shower or water percolating through ground of the earth. It all does it without any fanfare. Nobody told it to do it. It's just following its natural wu-wei sense of gravity to go where it needs to go. And what it does is it rinses things off, it washes things off, it cleans things. And then if you're around water long enough, it will file off the rough edges. I mean, just look at Antelope Canyon or Grand Canyon and see what happens when water has its way. What if Tao had its way with us? Could we be as beautiful as Antelope Canyon? Hmm, things like that. So yeah, so there's this idea of humility that you can't go to the Botox store and get what you need. Instead, what we need is this quiet humility in which we go low, and there we can be of service. We can be of service to others. We can be like water. We can go down to wherever it is we need to go and bring something, washing, cleaning, filing off rough edges. May take a while, but Tao's not fast, not fast at all. So that's my thoughts.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll continue with my third one, which is nonviolence. Nonviolence is wu-wei married with original instructions. Peace is already within. When peace is lost, there's something within that's not right. Violence can happen quite easily when the actors are disturbed themselves within. This is the message of verses 30 and 31 and 69. A story which I told recent on the podclass. Back in 1986, when I lived in Washington, D.C., the late Archbishop of Cape Town, South Africa, Desmond Tutu, the moral conscience of a South Africa that still practiced an unrepentant apartheid. Well, he came to a daily protest outside the South African embassy in Washington, and I was in attendance. And after he addressed first the oppressors inside the embassy, he totally killed me when he said this about violence and how it begins within us first. And he turns from the embassy and turns towards us and says these words. Hey, you gathered outside the embassy, do you hear me? You have the victory already. Do you understand what that means? It means that you have not belittled your cause with hatred of the other side. You have not besmirched your ethics by imitating the very hatreds that you protest. Remember, we fight and struggle with different weapons. Reconciliation is our tactic, our strategy. We are not here to vanquish. We are not here to make enemies. Do not humanize yourselves by practicing the same hatred that you despise in others. Save yourselves from the ethically defenseless adoption of the evils you abhor. For if you do not, when you assume leadership in the new South Africa, you will have to keep on fighting those hatreds and belittlements and resentments that you have kept alive. True peace begins within. Do not give over to hatred. And I was just slaughtered by that. It was great. Finally, because we are also Tao creatures, we are large enough, wise enough, and compassionate enough to be peace, no matter where you are. And my example is the hidden and submerged life of the common earthworm. Tao is like the common earthworm. And let me enlarge on this. What do worms do? Their good and nonviolent work is down in the dark, hidden and submerged. Because earthworms ingest the decaying organic stuff of the ground, stuff that no one thinks is important, and makes fertilizer of it. Crap into fertilizer. Like the earthworm, the Taoist takes the crap of the world and without superpower or fanfare simply makes fertilizer. which makes humus. Likewise, O human, we are humus, and that enables humaneness. Humus, humility, human, humane, humble. Humus is what we are made of. Humus is the place from which we sprang, and to which we shall return, dust to dust. In the dark, submerged is our original home. Our natural calling is earthworm-like, turning crap of our world into fertilizer. It's mud into pottery. It's tears into joy and laughter. It's chaos into harmony. This is the power for peace. For the power of all these earthworm-like practices, they root social justice. And as below, so above. As above ground, so below ground. As on the mat, so off the mat. Taoists are above all, or beneath all rather, quiet changers of hopelessness into hope, tears into joy, miseries into comfort, griefs into rejoicing, chaos into calm, wavering into resolve, and conflict into peace. Michael Franti sings this: all the shit you've given us is fertilizer. It is not in the nature of fear or violence to rule forever. Let me repeat that. It is not in the nature of fear or violence to rule forever. The lowly, humble earthworm is our guide. As James Baldwin said, one discovers light and darkness. That's what the darkness is for. But everything in our lives depends on how we bear the light. So, my teaching number 3 is nonviolence.
And I will join you right there, as that is also my third teaching. And again, we are brought back to nature and brought back to the garden from which all things can be taught in the most simplest of ways. And I think in our current culture, which is oftentimes so focused on content and headlines and these words and things that bring chaos to mind, we look only at the fruit. We see the product of violence. We see the school shootings or the loss of peace in nations far and close. And that's the fruit of violence. But so often we're not led to look at the seeds that were planted long, long ago inside of our own hearts, inside of our own gardens, that are then watered and then collectively taken care of to become the fruit that they are.
Yeah.
And this Taoist idea of nonviolence is to look inward and see the seeds that you plant inside your daily life, inside your daily heart mind, and that our true nature is to plant seeds of love and of openness. As your quote from James Baldwin says, it's not that everything in our life is about the darkness, it is how we bring the light into the lives we live.
Yeah.
And that, in its essence, is what the Tao is trying to tell us.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. I think we're ready for our fourth set. My fourth one is emptiness. Tao presents itself as empty or as emptiness, but empty of what? Tao is empty of aspiration, of action, and preference. Yet we who are so full of such may mistake our wishes as maybe aligned with Tao. We, so full of our wishes and preferences, move through life mostly through dreams of our own making, and we call that dream life. We call it life itself. And so it is, we mostly miss the vast reality of what is happening around us because we focus upon our own hallucinations. To join with Tao, we must empty and strip down, empty as a flute, empty as a bellows. The way to cure an overfull life, even a violent life, is to become empty ourselves. Why empty? To recognize Tao's emptiness, of course. Many a spiritual tradition has a teaching of emptiness, or that stage of, quote, pure consciousness, unquote, in which the mind has been relieved of all ego or desire-related objects and images. Emptiness is treated as a positive mystical state in Judaism, the Vedic or Hindu traditions, in Buddhism, and even in the Christian traditions. And in just a note on the Christian version of emptiness, in the scripture known as Philippians, Jesus is described as emptied. The word here in Greek is kenosis, and his empty state prepared him for the tasks that he had to do as the human God, or the God human. In Taoism, emptiness practice deconstructs illusions and hallucinations fed by the scattered and undisciplined mind. This deconstruction, however raw it can be, is liberation. Why do so many spiritual traditions focus upon the radical power of emptiness? So that what is original in us may emerge free of distortions. Emptiness kills ego. Emptiness ends falseness. Only the empty cup proves useful. Emptiness is abundance. When truly emptied of desire, see verse 1 here, one is more likely to see reality and not live in hallucination. What is not real cannot survive emptiness. Empty womb, empty ego, empty page, empty mind, all for one purpose: to get filled by original Tao's instructions for life. Being empty untangles things, exposes things. So consider Tao an empty womb, inexhaustible in its potential. Whatever empty space you can conceive, an empty field, an empty schedule, becoming emptied of a bad habit, it carries the potential for hope. Hope that in darkness does its work. Tao's womb is the laboratory of hope. And when we are emptied of stuff, of light, of ego, then we are most Tao-like, pure potential. Here's parts of verse 5 and 11. Both have similar titles: The Function of Emptiness, part 1, and then part 2. From 5, Tao functions like an emptied center between heaven and earth, acting here as a bellows to stoke fire, or there as a flute to sound music. One could never exhaust these empty spaces of their variations and gifts. What will run dry is chatter, trying to reckon with this mystery. Where is your place? In this silent center. And from verse 11, we read, the hub of a cartwheel has an empty center, which is more important to movement than those 30 spokes radiating from it. The hub's empty center is its sole functioning part. Fashion a bowl all the day long, but its inner emptiness, not its outer art, gives it its function. A house's empty center makes it livable. Likewise, the empty center of a window or door frame, what's not there, adds function. Otherwise, how would you get home? Form has its place, but emptiness serves. So that's my little sermon on emptiness.
Wow. Well, all I can say about your great expansion upon emptiness is that as I, in the last 24 hours or so, prepared to come be a part of this podcast and have this conversation with you, I was full of so much conception of how this would go and ways that maybe I need to prepare and fill myself with this knowledge and thoughts and words. And as the time went on, I found myself continuously not listening to that busy mind of preparation and of filling, and actually returning back to the Tao and its instructions to remain empty and uncarved and allowed for these forces to come through us. And so, again, like I like to reflect on my own present and real circumstances, here we are in that emptiness, allowing what is natural to come forth, and what could be more beautiful.
Yeah. I think this is a beautiful day. Thank you.
Yeah, and that it actually leads to the perfect segue into my last thing I've brought here, which is the concept of knowledge versus wisdom. And wisdom is different in that it is empty. It is not something to be filled of, it is something to be let go of. And so I go to verse 48 of Mark's translation of the Tao. And this verse is called Tao's Math. Pursuing knowledge, your routine is multiplication. Pursuing Tao, it is subtraction. Prune, lose, diminish, keep subtracting until there is no doer, no pursuing. With no pursuit and not doing, pure action shows itself. Keep your thumb on the scale, and it is meddling upon meddling. Get out of your own way and rejoin Tao's way. And so here we are in that empty space, subtracting what we think we're supposed to be doing and supposed to be saying on a podcast that is about learning about the Tao, as Mark has told me before in his many, many years as a professor of religion. The Tao is one of the hardest things to teach because of this inherent and incessant paradox of emptiness. And so my challenge to us all here as listeners is to continue to open to our emptiness and to our not knowing so that we can be filled with wisdom.
Boy, I have nothing to add. That was really good. Thank you. All right, you've heard our 8 ideas of why Tao still speaks to us. And I hope that you will find that that Tao, whatever translation you read, that you'll find voices still speaking to you, and that you are on this long, grand journey of understanding how you and the universe are made of the same stuff. For me, that's just so confidence building, and it's great. All right, class. As we begin to wind down, just to let you know, I'm working on several projects, one of which is a kid or family-friendly version of Tao Te Ching. Let me know if you're interested. We need to get Tao Te Ching's wisdom into young hands and bodies. My second project is the podclass series called The Technicolor Dreamcoat of Religion, the link for which is in the show notes. My email is there too, if you ever want to be in touch. This entire podcast has been an original work and has been brought to you free with volunteer labor from many people. I shout out podcast artwork by Audrey Davis. About 100 people added their voices to these podclasses. The song Put Your Roots Down has been graciously provided by Molly Hartwell. The copyright for quotations from Tao Te Ching is held by Fortress Press. May your every day begin in the same peace that built and sustains the universe. And may you become a local laboratory or a womb for the radical, violence-canceling hope for which we are made and to which we are called, lured, and completed.
Are you listening?